So we've got Maddie Smith joining us. Maddie, thanks very much for your giving up your time to speak to the kids at Redlands. We're obviously very, very lucky to have a superstar of the Australian game without giving you too big a head. Obviously, you've had a great career when you were at the Raw, winning many trophies, and then heading over to Asia. You obviously managed to bag a few as well. So really, really appreciative of you giving up your time. And the kids at Redlands, I know, are pretty excited. They've lined up their questions for you, so we might just jump straight in if that's okay.
Yeah, mate, fire away. Thanks for having us.
Thanks, mate.
Hi, I'm Liam from the Under 8 Academy. My question is, what was your favourite skill?
So yeah, your favourite skill, mate?
Very, very good question. And I think that with myself in the position that I play in, I think that it's really important that, number one, I'm able to receive the ball, but I'm also able to pass the ball. Because I play in defence, a lot of my passes, hopefully, are always forward. So whenever I'm passing forward, there's always a risk that the opposition can intercept my passes. So my favourite skill is the ability to have a really good first touch. That then sets me up to potentially look to play forward into the midfield or into the forwards, but also doing so that disguises the way that I pass. So sometimes I might look slightly one way and then just offset my pass into a different direction. It tricks the opposition midfielders or defenders in where the ball is going to go. So having a good first touch and being able to pass the ball really, really well.
So that's a good one. One of our key principles is trying to pass forward where you can. So that links really well there. So good one, good start.
Hi, my name is Daniel Shannon, and I'm in the Under 8 Academy team, and I'd like to ask, what was your hardest thing to learn in soccer?
Hey, mine?
Again, very, very good question. The hardest thing I learned in soccer, I love everything about soccer. So with training and playing on the pitch, any technical or tactical skill for me was a pleasure to be able to practice and try and learn. The hardest thing for me was probably from a mental perspective. Sometimes when you make mistakes, and that the higher the level you go, obviously the harder it becomes, and have the mental strength to always be brave. So I make mistakes just as much as the next player, but I've learned over the course of my career to forget about the mistakes and still be brave in a lot of the football actions that I try and do. And I think that's really important for players of all ages, especially as they grow older, to not be scared to make mistakes, to play with a confidence and freedom. So that's something which you as players will learn over a period of time. But I think that's one of the hardest things that I've had to learn throughout my career.
Okay, I might jump in there actually, Maddie. We've had a performance psychologist come and speak to the kids and do 3 lessons while we've been in lockdown. Is there anything there you say about you learnt to forget about your mistakes? Is there anything that you use to trigger that?
I think, yeah. So I guess when I was playing, I always hit, like, in the back of my mind, I always had a reset button. So as a player, you're always taught that, you know, you can play what you see, but it's about learning how to make the good decisions at the right time. And for me, if I potentially made a mistake, it wasn't so much a problem. I would then hit the reset button in my mind. So in theory, I'm not thinking about that action. I'm thinking about how I can help the team with my role in the next action, because you can't change what you've done in the past. You can change your next action in the future. And if that next action in the future is of benefit to the team, and that's the way you got to look at, because we do play in a team environment. If I hide, or if I am not being brave, or if I'm not doing the things that I should be doing, then the team's going to have to make sacrifices for the decisions that I make. So, like I said, in the back of my mind, if I made a mistake, it was like a little on-off switch, like I had with a light. It's like reset, back again. And that was my quick focus kind of go to, because in a game you're making thousands and thousands of actions based upon the pitches that you see at any given moment in time. So it's important that you don't think about the action that you've just done. And that can also go as in good actions too, you know, because how many times sometimes a player will do a good action and then they'll dwell on that good action for the next 3 or 4 seconds or minute or so, and then they'll stop doing the things that they should be doing in-house. So it works both ways, like bad actions, but also good actions.
Yeah, waiting for that round of applause because you had a good pass. Yeah, it's really good. That links really well to some of the stuff there that the performance psychologist said about just controlling what you can control, and like you said, being able to almost compartmentalize things and move on pretty quickly. So yeah, really good. Links well. It's almost like you planned that for me. So thanks.
Is Talomara, and I play for the under-8 academy team, and my question is, how do you keep fit in the off seasons?
How do I keep fit in the off season? That's a very good question, and it's very relevant to the situation that we're in now. But generally speaking, in the off season, for me, I always wanted to be as best as what I could be. So that meant that any single opportunity, I was always staying fit, and I was always staying active. So in the off season, especially when I was younger, I was always in the garden. I was always out with my friends in the street playing football. During school, I was always playing football. But generally speaking, the off season, especially when I was younger, it was just the ball was always at my feet. Like I said, I was in the garden with my friends. I was in the garden with my brothers. I was also down the local parks. Always playing football. The older that I got, I guess you could say, I got my opportunity to play professional football during an off season. So the season finished in the end of September, and I actually got an opportunity to play for North Queensland Fury the end of November. So that's a few months without any football, and I was always striving to become a professional player. So during those few months, I ensured that I was still keeping fit. I was going for runs. I was going for runs most days. I was still going to the gym. I was doing swimming. I was doing other forms of activity like tennis as well, playing basketball, just to try and stay fit. So it's a really good question. And like I said, if you can stay active, especially during this moment in time, whether or not that'll be in your front room, whether or not that'll be in your back garden or in the front of your street, or if you can get your parents down the park, then that's a really good way of keeping fit at this moment in time.
Yeah, good, nice and relevant. It's good stuff.
My name's Nate, and I'm from the under-8 academy team. And I was wondering, who was your favorite teammate when you played in the soccer team, and why?
Oh, very, very tough question. Who was my favorite teammate throughout my soccer teams? Well, I've been very fortunate. I've had lots and lots of football teams, and I've met lots and lots of good people and have lots of friends. And I think that's really important going through life, that within football and working in a team, you're able to, no matter where you go and how old you are, you always can join a football team, and you always can have 10, 15, 20 friends to kind of socialize with. If I was to choose one favorite friend of mine within football, is very, very difficult. I think it's also important that every team has a different dynamic of players and different personalities. So I think at times you have to respect that people are a little bit different, players are a little bit different, and they bring different things to the team, especially on the pitch, but also off the pitch. I've had the benefit of playing with some very special players. Obviously, Thomas Broich, Besar Berisham, Matt Mackay, Michael Theocritus, Henrique. There's a whole gulf of many different types of players and different types of people. So I think that I'll answer that with a straight bat and say that it's difficult to pick one, but I've made friendships that will last a lifetime. I think that's really important.
You know, that's the key thing, isn't it? Like, out of being a professional footballer, there's obviously a lot of pressure, but the main thing is there that you build relationships and friendships that last beyond your playing days, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that, I guess it's difficult to answer to an under-8 player, but I guess from a general perspective within, and especially during senior football, there's certain teams and there's certain players which you might not agree with or you might not get on. But I think that I've learned over my career that it's really important that you need to respect and understand the type of person that you're playing alongside, and you have to respect that sometimes you're not going to agree or you are going to have differences on the pitch. And therefore, if you can respect that and understand that, then you can deal with that in a much better manner moving forward, because the harmony of the team and the club is the most important aspect of any football.
Right, just stay on everyone's Christmas card list and you're all right. Yeah.
Yeah. And e-card nowadays, isn't it?
Yeah, right. All right, next one.
My name is Ethan Calendar, and I play for the Redlands United Academy team. My question is, how old were you when you first played in the soccer?
Oh, very good question again. How old was I when I first started playing football? I was born in England and raised in England, and we weren't as lucky as a lot of the young players nowadays, where you can start playing football at probably the age of 3, 4, 5, 6. Back then, my first ever league game was under 10s. Under 10s was my first ever league competitive match. But I first started playing within a team it was a school team at under 8s, and it was my friend's dad was the coach. So we used to train every Saturday morning, and that was my first official team. But that was my first ever match, my first ever game. But I was playing football probably from the age that I can pretty much walk. So I think football's always been close to me from a very early age.
All right, good. I was going to ask another question, but I know that's coming up later, so I'll let the kid have it.
All right.
Hi, my name's Jack, and I'm from the Under 8 Academy team. My question is, what is your highest number of struggles?
Ooh, what is my highest number of juggles? It would definitely be in the hundreds. I think that when I was, especially growing up, the ball was always at my feet, especially those younger years in my life. I was always practicing, I guess you could say, skills and tricks. And when I was growing up, juggles was one of the favorite skills and competitions I used to do with my friends. We didn't have the internet back then, so it was pretty much in the back garden or the park. But I would say from memory, it would be in the hundreds, maybe 300 roughly, something like that. But that was probably when I was a bit older than you. I first started off just doing one juggle, one bounce, one juggle, one bounce, one juggle, one bounce, and then I slowly built myself up to do 2 juggles, 1 bounce, 2 juggles, 1 bounce, and then when I got to 10 and 20 doing that way, I tried to do 2 different feet and So I started off very, very low until I was able to build myself up to be able to sustain those 100 marks. But I was never a player to have lots of skills and tricks. I was always a player to, in my opinion, when I self-reflect on myself, I try and do the basic things the best, and that's my area of expertise.
Not chasing your first touch, then, no?
First touch.
All right, here's fancy dress coming up here with this United shirt on.
Hi, my name is Hunter, and I'm in the Under 8 Academy team. And I'm wondering if you can give some advice to those who are just starting out.
Sorry, I didn't quite catch that.
Yeah, so Hunter's just asking if you could give some advice to young footballers that are just starting out.
Okay, good question, Hunter. Advice for players that are just starting out. Some of the best years in my football career were when I first started out, where it was, and football's always been fun and I've always enjoyed it. But those early years, my best advice that I can give you is simply just to enjoy football. Really enjoy being part of a team, really enjoy playing football on the pitch and training and being with your teammates. Ensure that the enjoyment factor is the number one piece of advice that I can give to any young footballer. Play as much as you can, train as much as you can. Work hard, but also I think enjoyment is one of the biggest pieces of advice that I can give you at this moment in time, especially in your age group of career.
Nice, good stuff.
My name is Yusei Bush. I play Under 8 Academy. My question is, what age did you start playing soccer?
Yeah. So similar to what you've had.
Yeah. Again, very, very good question. I first started playing football as early as I can remember, because my father was also a football player. So my father's first toy for me was probably a football. So as quickly as I could walk, I probably had a football at my feet. my first team and my first real competitive match was under 10s. But I do remember playing with a friend's dad was the coach through a school team, and that was under 8s, and that was one training per week every Saturday morning. So I first started playing football in the I guess you could say in the back garden in the front living room, but then my first competitive game wasn't until under 10s.
I think that might be really appropriate for Usai because his older brothers might be influencing him quite a lot as well. So I think he's probably had a ball at his feet ever since he's been born as well. So yeah,
family. No, it's if you think about it, all of the players within, well, it doesn't matter if it's any sport really. Sport always starts at home, mate, doesn't it? Do you know what I mean? So everything starts within the front door.
Exactly. Like if you look here, another United shirt. So I'm sure that's not by choice. That's probably mum or dad put that on here.
No, it's purely by choice.
I have a question. How long do you train for each day?
We won't comment on Hong Kong on this one, mate.
Yes. Good question. How long do I train for each day? I think that if I talk in the professional, when I was a professional player, it certainly ranges from club to club. So here in Australia, the training program would require us to be in roughly around 2 to 2.5 hours of contact time with the football club. So that meant by the time I arrive at the club, we obviously change into our training gear. Then there'll be some pre-training activity. So I guess in simple terms, it might be some core, some stretching, or some balance work, or any sort of mini kind of training preparation. It could be bands or rollers, any sort of training preparation that can help us best prepare and perform for the actual training session. Most training sessions in my career, especially in Australia, lasted anywhere from 60 minutes to 90 minutes. And then post training, we would have either, obviously you have a cool down and stretch, but then we'd also use recovery strategies like ice baths, especially here in Australia as a good base of recovery. But as a professional player, you're always training. So it's not necessarily what the coaches can see, what you're doing at football. You're always training away from football. So most days I was recovering and stretching in my swimming pool, for example, or I was making sure that I was always hydrated. I was making sure that my nutrition and my diet was always the best that it could be. I made sure that I always had really good sleep. So as a professional player, you exert so much energy that, you know, those hydration, nutrition, and sleep are massively important for your recovery. It's little small percent things. So there's one thing to have training time, but then I guess to be the best that you can be, what are you then doing to support your training? So very good question, and maybe I've over answered on that one.
No, it's a great answer because obviously the kids have got training programs that have been sent out at the moment, and some of the stuff you mentioned there is part of what I guess we're trying to educate young footballers on. So your nutrition, I've actually done some cooking classes for them. They're not very good, but try my best. And we've got some stuff in there with the injury prevention, like you're mentioning there, before training, you're doing your core work and your balance work, which is so important just to prepare yourself to play.
Yeah, it is. I think that it's something which certainly changed throughout my football career, because at the beginning of my football career, I guess sports science wasn't as prominent as what it is now, and I think that's a massive advantage to modern day footballers, especially you young players which are coming through the system. Really get into that mindset and I guess structure in terms of your training routine to make focus on those smaller finer details, because it will help you when it comes to your performance. And you know, especially at the top end, you know, if you can limit and reduce the amount of injuries that you can have, the better and longer your career is going to be.
100%. All right, under 9s, here we go.
Hi Matt, it's Tommy Wilson, goalkeeper of the under 9 SAP team. I would just like to know, how did you deal with the pressure of being the Brisbane Roar captain?
Very, very good question. I was very, very fortunate to be able to captain Brisbane Roar. We were very lucky that we were quite successful during those years, and to deal with the pressure, I think that the club made a good decision in making sure that there was many different types of leaders within the football team squad. So we had a squad of approximately 23, 25 players, and throughout that team, there wasn't just one leader. We had multiple different leaders within that team that helped me lead the team itself. So as a person, I'm always, I guess, a natural person that likes to take responsibility. I like to lead teams. I like to help players. I also like to set examples. But I think it's really important, especially within modern football, that there's a really good team ethic on multiple leaders to help drive the team. And I think that that's one of the best things that, and probably one of the most key areas as to why we were so successful during those years at Brisbane Roar, because we had many different leaders and different types of leaders as well. Some leaders were very good off the pitch. Some leaders were very good in the dressing room. Some leaders were very good on the pitch. Some leaders were very vocal. Some leaders were so you don't have to necessarily be one type of captain. There's many different styles of being a captain and a leader. But I handled that pressure by surrounding myself with good people, by listening and learning to other people and knowing my players. And I think that that helped me focus so that I could be the best that I can be from a performance perspective. And that's what I focused on, making sure that I done my role and my responsibilities for the team. I made sure first and foremost that was a job which I done to the best of my ability, and that helped me focus with regards to the pressures, especially within football.
I guess this might be one for me, mate. With the players that sort of took those leadership roles, were they set assigned leadership roles by the coaching staff, or was that just players just naturally sort of stepped up into, you said there some were quite good off the field, some were vocal. So was that set by the coaching staff or just happened naturally?
I think when we first started at the Roar, Ange and the coaching staff set the leadership group. I joined the leadership group and was made captain my second year at the club. Yeah. And there wasn't any isolated specific, okay, well, Matt, you're in charge of your particular unit, for example, you're in charge of these 3, 4, 5, 6 players. Yeah. It was always like a group setting. It was always a group dynamic in terms of developing ourselves. So we would have, I guess you could say, sports psychology meetings as a leadership group, and we'd also have it as a team and a squad as well. Yeah. And I think that naturally the benefit of having multiple leaders in a leadership group is you might have one player that feels like a younger player or a different player that feels comfortable talking with me, but might not feel comfortable talking with another leader. Mm. And vice versa. You might have some players which feel comfortable talking to another leader, but not necessarily the captain or myself. And I think it's really important that players have that opportunity to be able to voice and have that basically being able to communicate and have someone listen to them. So it wasn't necessarily set, but within the leaders, I guess they were mature enough and experienced enough or educated enough to be able to observe other people and understand, like when you're with someone in a daily environment, when someone's happy or when someone's sad just by their mannerisms. Yeah. So I guess a key part of a leader is focusing on the behaviors of other players and I guess understanding and knowing when players are sad and it might just be subtle questions. Hey, Maddie, is everything okay today? Or, you generally get to feel the dynamic, especially when you're in a full-time environment where the players are enjoying their football or enjoying the environment and I guess that's where communication is really, really important. So dealing with that sort of pressure, it was done by just the roles and the jobs and the focus of doing that, so that we didn't really think about it as pressure. We thought about it as, okay, well, this is going to be of massive benefit to us. The closer we are as a team, or as a squad, a coaching staff, a support staff, as a club, then I think the bigger the buy-in the players will then have, and then that will then reflect back in the training with regards to intensity and mindset and hunger it's like a massive domino effect.
Yeah. No, I asked that question because that's actually something the kids probably don't know at the moment, but behind the scenes, the coaches at Redlands, we've kind of been compiling a document for each age group with who's in the leadership groups. We haven't released it to them yet, but that's kind of what you're saying there about we've been sort of looking at like the players' behaviour and their personalities to try and place them. So like you say, then it becomes a domino effect where the boys actually start to sort of take a lot more ownership over what's going on. So it's actually nice that you've said that. So it kind of links from a professional environment down to what the kids are in at the moment. So it's good.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, like it's pleasing to hear that that you're going down. And there's no right or wrong way, but I think that from my experiences, I think that, and it's something which we're also doing at City, and I think that it's really important that that we help develop leadership roles within younger players at an earlier stage as well. I think that it's and having not just having one person that's the leader. There's multiple roles and different types of leaders that can impact on the team and the club.
Yeah, it's good. That's good. All right, next one. Under 10s.
Hi, my name is Matt from Redlands United Under 10 Sup, and my question for you is, how is training different from the UK to in Australia?
Oh, good question. How was training different to the UK to what it is in Australia? I guess first answer off the bat is a lot colder. training there, you're constantly putting layers on, whereas in Australia you constantly try and take layers off, I guess you could say. But very good question. That there's different countries throughout the world will have different types of intensities, different cultural backgrounds, different styles of football, I guess you could say. I left England when I was 24, so I was playing senior men's football. Probably the big difference initially that I had to adjust to football here in Australia was the level of intensity within the English football is very, very high. And that's not to say that the intensity is low here in Australia, but the overall dynamic within the team with endurance and conditioning and fitness is players, the intensity of the game there was a lot quicker. So for example, quite often, if I would take a touch, I would pretty much be challenged wherever you are on the pitch on my next touch. The difference here in Australia is that it's very physical here, and the fitness levels are very, very high. But the tactical element of the game here, especially as I've progressed my career, is an element which means that there's a lot more system or structure of play throughout the latter part of my career in Australia, opposed to my early years in England. And England has probably changed now, but especially when I was growing up, it was very intense, very, very physical, and the game dynamic was very different. So when I say tactical here in Australia, when I was growing up, it was very I guess you could say direct is probably the best way to put it, whereby it was we attack, the opposition attacks, we attack, the opposition attacks. Whereas the style of football here in Australia, and from purely my experience, is that it's a lot more possession based. It's a lot more technical and tactically based, opposed to my development in England. So very different cultures, very different histories in terms of football and its landscape. And great question.
I guess that depends on obviously the coaches that you're exposed to. Like I've actually been reading Ange's book during this little lockdown period, and he obviously talks an awful lot there about the ball, and for you guys at the Roar, that it was just always about the ball. Other things didn't really interest you guys as a team. It was just the ball. So when you say there, like the Australian tactics and possession's really big, I guess that links to the coaches that you're exposed to, doesn't it?
It does, absolutely. And it's not said that coaches in England are bad, because they're not. It was just this, I mean, obviously my development of my generation of player, it was just significantly different. And if I didn't learn the things that I learned in England, like for example, the basics that I learned in England put me in good stead for I guess my career in Australia. So I was never always a central defender. I only turned playing a central defender when I was 26. But I was actually a striker when I was at Portsmouth, and then as the years progressed, I was a central midfielder, and then pretty much with the final part of my career, I was playing central defence. So I guess what I learned throughout those years before arriving to Australia, I guess set myself up for the possession-based style and the tactical-based style, which Ange completely changed my way of playing football. And I'm of a huge belief under playing in a certain way, how I would like to deliver when I'm also coaching. So the biggest, just on that, and I think it's really important to note that you're going to go through stages in players' careers where you might go to a different club and they might play a different style of football, or you might go to another club and it's a different style of football with a different coach and a different methodology. It's about being really open to every single coach and every single style of football. And I think that if that was one of the key things that I learned with Ange was at the beginning. There was quite a bit of criticism for the methodology as to how we were playing football. We didn't win a game in the first 5 rounds, and we were being criticised for playing this Barcelona type possession-based football. And then obviously from that we went for the 6 games unbeaten and won a double championship. So I guess it's being really open and being consistent with your support to the methodology and the coach, especially to the club that you're going to, because for me, I've learned over many different coaches, some good things, some bad things, some things which I will use as a coach going forward. But I think that it's really important that that you can always learn from many different styles. And I guess my time here in Australia has, I guess, given me my mindset and my philosophy for how I want to deliver going forward.
No, it's good. No, it's really good. Good question.
Very good question.
My name's Isaac from Redlands United Under 10 SAP. My question today is, how did you become a professional player?
So you get that one a bit quiet. Do you hear that one?
Yeah, got it, mate. How to become a professional player?
Yeah, how did you become a professional player? Yeah.
How did I become a professional player?
Yeah.
Very good question. I guess how I become a professional player. I think firstly it starts with myself. So I always made sure that as a player and as a person, I was always striving to be my best. I was always, every single opportunity within football, I was always wanting to improve. If that's training, if that's games, if that's with my friends down the street or in the park, I always wanted to be the best. I always wanted to play at the next level. So that commitment and hunger to always challenge myself was a key, I guess. And even today, I'm always challenging myself and wanting to be better. But that enabled me to, when in terms of how I become a professional player, I was playing for Brisbane Strikers at the time, and in the old QSL, which is the current NPL. In fact, where I met Graham many years ago. And
more grey hairs.
Yeah, well, yeah, just a few. But I was playing really well for Brisbane Strikers, and I think it's really important that when players are playing really well, but not only one game or 2 games, but they're playing really well over a longer period of time. So that might be over 1 season or 2 seasons. People here and clubs here in Australia, they do come and scout. So I was playing for Brisbane Strikers in Townsville, and the North Queensland Fury coach Ian Ferguson was there at the time, and they watched me play, and then they expressed some interest in me. At that moment in time, there wasn't an immediate opportunity, but they kept track of me over the next 6 months. And long story short, there was an opportunity to join their team as they continued to monitor my progress. And they approached Brisbane Strikers and then also invited us to come up for a mini trial as such. And then that's how I become a professional football player. I took the opportunity. I flew up to North Queensland Fury, and pretty much at the weekend I made my debut against Adelaide. So it starts with yourself. It starts with making sure that you're always challenging yourself and being the best that you can be. It's then ensuring that your performances are really high over a longer period of time. And then a lot of it's a little bit down to a bit of luck. You do need coaches and professional clubs to come and watch you to ensure that they're watching you at the right time, and that they are impressed with the performances that they're seeing. And then if you're lucky enough to get an opportunity like I was, then it's down to you to take it. So that's how I become a professional football player.
Playing for Stewie at Brisbane Strikers, weren't you?
Yeah, Stuart McLaren, yeah.
Yeah, and then he followed you, didn't he, up to Townsville?
A little bit, yeah. He was. I actually, yeah, because the club went void as such, so our contracts were with it, and that's when I signed first year with Ange, and then he went up to Fury with is it Franz Stratham?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
I was going to get you to give me some gossip on Stu, but we might do that off camera, mate.
I also have a question for you. My question is about your pathway to becoming a professional soccer player. Like, was it easy or was it hard? And what you really have to do to become at that level?
My pathway to professional football. What was the second part of the question?
Just roll it back.
Like, was it easy or was it hard? And what you really have to do to become at that level?
It's a very, very good question. My pathway to professional football is a little bit different to your typical football player. And the second part of your question was it hard? So I'll start with my pathway began at a local club in England, similar to you guys. I then was lucky enough to be scouted and offered a professional contract with Portsmouth Football Club, which back then were in the second league of English football. And I spent the next 7 years playing in a professional academy where I was training. At that point, it was twice a week plus the game at the weekend. So I was in a professional academy for 7 years. I was then released at the age of 17, and principally I spent the next 10 years outside of professional football. So I was playing semi-professional football. During that period, I went and got an education. So during that period, I have a degree. I also have a master's degree, and I also worked in industry for a few years before returning to professional football at the age of 27. So I then I'm now 37, and I guess you could say retired the middle of last year from professional football. So I was lucky to have 10 years as a professional football player. Was it hard? It was very challenging along the way. I think that across that short story, there's been many high points, but there's also been many low points. And I think that throughout life and throughout your football career, there's going to be times where you're going to be challenged. There's going to be times when you're not going to be picked for a certain team. There's going to be times when you might not be selected for elite competitions, or it might even be that you might not be selected for the first 11 to start the game, or you might be left out of the squad, or you are going to be faced with many challenges. But I guess how I dealt with that, and I have had occasions throughout my career where I have been challenged in those ways. You must stay focused on always pushing yourself and challenging yourself, and always being in the mindset that you want to be as best that you can be as a player and also as a person, but then also to support and to help the players within your squad. So there was times when I was a squad player and I knew that I had to wait for an opportunity to be able to play in the first team, and I had to keep pushing every single day. I had to work hard, and I had to be better and better and better. And I had to also push the players that I was trying to take their spot from as well. And that helped benefit the team, because if I'm pushing the players that are constantly playing, then that's helping the team perform. And that made me a better person, because when I did finally get the opportunity to play, I knew that I earned that opportunity to play. And then it was down to me to be able to keep my position and keep my spot, because within football, it is competitive. And when you get to the elite level, it is, there are players that want to play just as much as you. So there are challenges, there are hard times. And I guess having focus and having discipline and the mindset to always, like I said, push, challenge, always want to be better, always have an ambition in mind that you don't deter from that, and you will be tested. And that's where I think it's really important that your teammates can help you during those times. I had many of my teammates when times were tough that they lent advice or counsel for me. That's also really important, like for your coaches as well, to communicate with your coaches, to ask questions. I guess is always a common advice to young aspiring football players. If you are finding things hard or you are being challenged, then there are avenues in which you can communicate to other players and also coaches and parents as well.
Yeah, some magic advice in there. I won't say too much more, but yeah, that's brilliant for young footballers.
No, well, good, mate. Like I said, it's a bit of a complex answer, but yeah.
No, it's good. Like, yeah, just like so many things there about just backing yourself, but also like, you know, it's how you deal with adversity, isn't it? Because football, I can speak from experience at the moment, but football will give you adversity. It's just about how you cope with it and make sure it doesn't get on top of you, isn't it? So yeah, it's good. That links with the psychology stuff we've been doing. It's good.
No, it's I probably could have touched on that actually, but yeah.
That's all right. No, all right. I'll roll this next one for you.
Redlands United. I just wanted to know what the sacrifices you made to become a professional footballer. Thank you.
Very polite as well, Sydney. Yeah, good.
Yeah, very good. Very, very good question. Some of the sacrifices that I've made to become a professional football player. I think this is a question and answer which I like to discuss a lot, because I think if you want anything in life, I guess how much are you prepared, or what are you prepared to do to be able to achieve it? And I think that's a really good question with regards to you as developing football players and aspiring football players as you get older throughout your career. And I guess you have choices. And I can talk from a positive element on this, and also from a negative element on this as well. Like the reason why I got into Portsmouth when I was younger was because of, I guess you could say, my performances, my critique as a player, my ability as a player. And I guess throughout those years, the pressure of English football, when I was 15, 16, so just about to turn 17, my mindset didn't change, but I was going through those years, especially those mid-teenage years, where my game was probably impacted a little bit based upon my personality. And I guess confidence is probably not confidence, but my choices and the things going on in my life during that point. And it resulted in me not being brave enough on the pitch. Is probably the big reason why I didn't make it as a professional player at Portsmouth when I was younger. And I reflect back on my career, I stopped doing the things in the games that got me there in the first place. And it was because, not that I ever made mistakes, and not that I was ever the worst player on the pitch, but I stopped, I guess you could say, being one of the higher performers on the pitch because I was scared to make mistakes. So I would make the easy pass rather than make the more complex pass, or I'd necessarily be a couple of yards around a player opposed to opening of a player. So what I learned from that, and it took me some time to kind of readjust and refocus my mind, but I then had a choice. I guess the choice would be, do I guess fall into a semi-professional environment where I have work, I have relationships. I guess you have, especially in your late teens and early 20s, there's other distractions socially, which is I'll leave those words as socially. But do I make the choice to still engage in some of them activities, or do I make sacrifices? Like, do I make sure that I'm not out partying with my friends, for example? Do I make sure that I'm not I'm talking now early 20s throughout my career, am I not doing drugs or smoking or having late nights, or am I not missing training? Am I making sure that I'm at games? Am I still ensuring that in the off season, we discussed it before, in the off season, I'm still trying to better myself and still trying to put myself in the best opportunity that if a pro club did come, that I was always ready. During the season, did I Sometimes not socialize with friends, going out for dinner because I knew I had a big game the next day. So to make sacrifices along my development years came down to choices. For me, when I turned a professional football player, is a different type of sacrifice, because there is, when you're a professional football player, you are a professional football player full time. So there's no part-time basis within professional football. So especially during from the moment I got the opportunity, so I guess you could say today, really, has there been occasions where, you know, myself and my wife have been invited out for a meal and some drinks, but I know that I've got training or games, and, you know, to my wife and family's frustration at times, it's, well, sorry, but, you know, we can't do it at this moment in time because of football. Do I ensure that I'm getting into bed early because I know I have training in the morning? Do I know that you know, there's luxuries of many food outlets, but do I make sure I have home cooked food because it's better for my nutrition, that I know it's going into my body wholeheartedly? Does it mean that you know, that it's an alcohol free policy during season, and then off season it's a different scenario? So making lots of sacrifices and choices at different stages of my career have probably shaped my career, and it's kind of been a little bit different. So
the big
in
thing,
short,
sorry to interrupt you, it's a big thing there, like basically all the examples you're giving, you're basically like identifying that you're controlling what you can control.
yeah, absolutely, because there's so many factors, I guess, that you can't control, and therefore it's unknown. So a simple one of that's nutrition. Like I was very cautious about Powerade. I was very cautious about all these protein shakes and carbohydrates, like these pre and post drinks, because do you really know what kind of goes into them? And don't get me wrong, like I like a dessert as much as the next person, but I guess you could say that I especially during those professional years, and even before, I tried to ensure that I knew what exactly was going into my body, because I knew generally the output that I needed in order for me to perform. And it's the same with hydration. You know, like you know, drinking alcohol is a perfect example. You know, you have the choice, especially as you guys get into your late teens, and I guess you could say early 20s, is you know, the alcohol consumption. You know, when I was playing semi-professional, it was in, I guess you could say, very reduced moderation, and it was always at the right time. When I was playing professional football, especially during the season, it was making sacrifices. Well, what do I want? Do I want to continue being a professional football player, or do I want to, I guess, reduce my standards a little bit and not necessarily relax, because that's the wrong way to put it, but enjoy myself in other ways? And I was very fortunate, and I was very lucky that I had the opportunity to become a professional football player. And I hope all young players get the opportunity to I guess have the opportunity, like, have to emulate some of the experiences that I've had. So I made the decision that because I wanted it so much, I was prepared to do anything to sustain myself within professional football.
Mate, it's almost like you've read the training plan. It's very good. Thanks, mate. All right, under 11 questions for you.
What was your training schedule like? Did you practice every day?
Yeah, very similar to the question before. When I was a non-professional player, we were training 3 times a week plus a game, but I always made sure that I was doing some physical activity in the off days. So it could be a swim, it could be going to the gym and just doing some bike or some injury prevention or some core weights. Or depending upon the loading, just going out for a top-up run. So during my non-professional years, it was trying to be active as much as I can, or that my body would allow. In the professional arena in Australia, generally speaking, we would have at Brisbane, we would have 2 days off a week, and we would never kind of train 3 days in a row. And we would always have 2 training sessions before a game, which is a little bit more complex. But if you can say 5 days out of the 7 days were active training days within Brisbane. In Asia, it was a little bit different. We would train 6 days a week, which was the methodology and the science behind that. So I guess there's different countries and different cultures have different training platforms, but especially at your age, I was training pretty much every single day.
I just 6 days a week.
I know.
Sunday's your day off if you're lucky.
I was going to say it was 7 for a lot of them. I didn't want to kind of repeat what the other kind of question or was said, so I kind of fast forward a little bit on that.
That's magic. It's magic.
Hi Matt, Ellis Hawkins, under 11 SAP team. As a fellow Englishman who recently moved to Australia, what advice can you give me to help me with my soccer career?
Well, I guess that's my first piece of advice. It's I guess that's my first piece of advice is football and not soccer. Firstly, I hope you've settled into Australia, where you and your family have settled into Australia very, very well. If you're as lucky as I have, I think that you'll find it's a beautiful country and you'll have lots of fun. My advice to you, I guess you could say, is similar to any young aspiring football player. Always try your best. Always work your hardest. Always maximize every football opportunity that you can, whether or not that's in the park with your friends, at school, training at your club, or playing games for Redlands or your school. Most importantly, have fun. Always walk off the pitch having enjoyment from playing football. So that's my key advice. Always willing to learn, always wanting to learn, always striving to be the best you can be, walking off the pitch like you want to play another game or you want to get to another training session.
Magic, mate. Very good.
It's Alicia from under 11 SAP. I have a question to ask you. What was your best achievement during your career?
Very good question, and I guess I've been fortunate to have some good achievements. I guess you could say first great achievement was making my professional debut. Was something which I made at the age of 27. So to get that achievement in my lifetime was an amazing feeling for myself. I guess the next achievement was to win the A-League and the grand finals. I was lucky to win 3 and captain 2 were great achievements, and then finally to represent Australia to obviously play for the Socceroos. So there's a few good achievements in there. I guess you could, if I could pinpoint a few. There's been some great achievements over in Asia as well to I guess challenge myself in a different climate and different culture and environment, and to reach milestones for the club that I played for over there when no other foreign player had done so. For example, captaining a foreign team as a foreign player is a great achievement. To be the first player to get over 100 games for a foreign club is also some other achievements, which in a small nutshell, there's I guess several which I can look back upon my career and I guess you could call them highlights.
Mate, I think that's obviously one of the reasons I wanted to try and pick your brains like we are now, because your career's been amazing in terms of the successes, and like you said, you came in so late, but from then on, like it's been pretty good, pretty trophy laden, to be fair. So it gives the kids some really good examples, isn't it?
Well, I think that I guess these questions there's great flow to them, and I guess there's common themes. I think when we look back at this video, and if you could like pick common themes from I guess my career and how I've basically done it, there's kind of been good things and kind of bad things. But like I said, when it's one thing to get an opportunity in life, but then it's really hard to I guess keep that opportunity, and that's the mindset that I kind of had whenever I was at clubs, was that I never got complacent, or I never took any position for granted. And I always tried to stay true to myself and didn't try and be somebody or something that I'm not. And I guess on that, I'm quite a generally speaking quite a loyal person that wants to repay the people that have put faith in myself. So I never wanted to people that have given me a chance. I never wanted to let anybody down. So, let alone myself down. So once I had that chance, I was so committed to keeping it. And like I said, being the best that I can be, not only for myself, but and maybe this is a little bit deep, but along that journey, there was a bigger legacy at play. Like I emotionally and physically bought into what we were trying to achieve. So when you buy into something which is a lot bigger than just yourself, it's amazing the sort of distances, and it's amazing the sort of things that can be achieved when you have a collective vision or legacy or drive towards something. And I was lucky that at Fury we had something, at the Raw obviously we had something which was pretty significant, obviously. And then again, when I was playing overseas, there was a very similar legacy which I was trying to kind of build and play a massive key role in.
No, brilliant, mate. Brilliant. Next one.
Hi, Matt. My name's Cody Riggs, and I play for Redlands under 11 South. My question to you is, which coach influenced you the most in your career?
Oh, is he going to do keep ups as well? Yeah.
Oh, you got a head in there as well.
Yeah.
Very good question. Which coach influenced me throughout my career? I've been lucky enough to play under some great coaches at different times in my career. So I'll just name a couple. But when I was released from Portsmouth, I then spent the next few years playing, I guess you could say, non-league and university football in England. And there was two coaches that I was playing university football for, were Mark Richards and Tom Radcliffe, and they I guess made me fall. Not that I ever lost the love for football, but they kind of reinvented myself, that I had the confidence, and they gave me the belief that I can push and strive to the next level, because they gave me that confidence to be able to do so. So that was kind of like a returning point for myself from a mental perspective, that I could potentially keep pushing and driving. The next was Ian Ferguson. Obviously, he was the first coach to give me my professional debut. So I guess you could say that's a massive impact and influence on my career. Without him taking a gamble and chance on me, I wouldn't have experienced potentially the experiences that I've had at the pro environment. The biggest impact on my career is without a doubt Ange Postecoglou. I guess he brought us. I'd only played 11 games in the A-League for North Queensland Fury, because I joined halfway through the year, and when our contracts were void, he basically had confidence in me to come to Brisbane. And then the way in which Brisbane evolved over in like the short space of time, and obviously over a longer period of time, shaped who I kind of become as a player, shaped who I become as a person as well. And I guess that those years working under Ange and learning from him every single day really played a key influence in my career. And then obviously from an overseas perspective, there was many influences, but those 3 or 4 coaches probably played a big influence and impact in my career. I guess there's probably one person that I'm missing, and that's the role of parents. Like, parents play a massive role in your career, so it's probably a question that probably isn't asked enough. And the coaches have been, some coaches, like I just mentioned, have played a massive role in my career to date. And but obviously your parents are people that are there every single day watching you and helping and supporting you, and they kind of go through the emotions and highs and lows just as much as what you do. So I think that I can have my parents, and as you get older, I guess wives and girlfriends also play a massive role as well. So there's a few in there.
That's a good one, mate. It's good. All right, next one.
Hey Matt, Jack Holborn here from the Redlands United 11 South team, and I got a question for you. As a captain of the Brisbane Roar, how did you inspire your players, and what did you say to them to win the grand final of the A-League?
Very good question. How did I inspire the players during the Brisbane Roar to win the A-League? I think that the best form of inspiration that not the best, but there's a few forms of inspiration that is key throughout your career. One is to be a good person. I think it's really important that you have good ethics and behaviors and morals as a person, that you always you place and respect the people that you're working with and the people that you surround yourself with. The most important way to, I guess, motivate your players and drive your players is by example. I think I'm a key believer in you to set good examples, especially as one of the leaders in your group. If you set good examples on the pitch and off the pitch, then that creates standards which everybody can see. The players can see, the coaching staff can see. So in every single training session, I made sure that I was always one of the hardest working players. Technically and tactically, I wasn't the best player within Brisbane at that time. There was many players that are better than me, but the captain doesn't always need to be the best player. They need to have good standards and set good examples. So I always made sure that I was working harder than, or just as hard as everybody else, if not harder. And also making sure that I was doing my roles and responsibilities on the pitch. So the jobs that I had to do when we were attacking or when we were defending, I made sure that I was doing that 99% of the time to the best of my ability, so that then helped the team and other players perform their roles and responsibilities, and that obviously impacts the team. So to motivate and I guess influence the players, amongst other things, but if I was to pick a few, definitely those traits that I've just mentioned.
Good one. Keep rocking on, mate.
Matt, it's Andrew Tanner. I was just wanting to ask, who was the hardest person you've ever played against?
Oh, very good question. The hardest player I've ever played against. I will in the A-League, the hardest player that I've played against, there's a couple. I think that one I've played with and against, and one that I've just played against. So Archie Thompson from Melbourne Victory was a striker that was very, very smart in his movement. Was very, very quick. As a central defender, obviously it's easy when strikers stand in front of you and we can see you. Whereas Archie Thompson was a player that always used to work off the shoulder. He always used to move into positions where, as a defender, I always had to look over my shoulder and be very vigilant as to his positioning, because he was very smart at making runs, and he could, especially in the box, his goal scoring ratio was very, very good and very, very high. The other player is I played with and played against, and that's Besart Berisha. I think that he's, within Australian football, he's definitely one of the hardest players that I've played against, and obviously had the privilege of playing with. And similar to Archie, his movement in and around the box is very, very high. His movement off the ball is very, very high. He also has the ability to I guess play and link play as well. So those are two players in the Australian League which I found very, very tough. The hardest player that I've probably played against from a external perspective was when we played against Juventus for the All Stars, and I had to mark Carlos Tevez and Llorente. So one was shorter than me, but very, very quick and very, very dynamic, and the other one was pretty much probably twice the size of me. He was 6'5" and very, 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 very strong and powerful. But then behind that, you had the likes of, I guess you could say, Paul Pogba and Pirlo, which proved very, very difficult. So when you have players that you're playing against of that quality, it's a very, very difficult game, but a great experience nonetheless.
Tevez, proper player, mate. Very good. Like him. And that's good.
Yeah.
No, good. Top answers. All right. Who's next?
Hi, Matt. My question is, what position did you play as a child, and what position did you want to play as a child?
Right, so I think you kind of answered the first bit, haven't you, by saying you started off as a striker and made the way backwards.
Yep, I think that it's another good question, and there's probably a good lesson in that too. Like I started off as a striker when I was as early as I can remember, and by the time that I was released from Portsmouth, I was then playing, I guess you could say, more of a attacking / box-to-box midfielder. And then when I made my professional debut at the age of 27, I started playing central defender at 26. So I guess I've gone in 7-year cycles really. but I think that there's a good point there that just because potentially players are starting in one position at any given moment in time doesn't necessarily mean, or you shouldn't be closed-minded into playing other positions, because depending upon the level that you're playing at, sometimes and also your competencies and skills as a player can also depend on the position that you're playing, and I guess where your strengths lie. And I guess from my career, at different stages, they've lied in striker, also midfield, and also defense, and that's also given me the ability to be able to understand different positions and different roles within a team, so that I can relate to other positions in the pitch.
Favorite position then? Centre back?
Striker for sure. That's where the fun's at.
All right, nice one. Okay, under 12s.
Hi, I'm on from under 12s. I would like to know what mental tool you use when you're under pressure.
Good question. What mental tool do I use when I'm under pressure? I think that the mental tool that I use is that, I guess I've been lucky to play in systems whereby we have organization and responsibility. So when there's lots of pressure, my focus point is always my role and how that is performed within a game or in training. From a psychological perspective, it's being brave. I think that when there's times in games where the pressure's really high, or there's times in games where you really are challenged and it's very, very difficult. And sometimes, there has been times in I guess when I was younger where I wasn't able to cope with that pressure, and I wasn't able to cope with that with that challenge. And then obviously the byproduct of that is obviously the team suffers. But as I've matured and as I've developed as a person, I've been stronger and braver, and I've had more, I guess you could say, more confidence based upon my experiences to be able to better prepare myself. And I guess in training is a good way to prepare for those sorts of situations. But then as you go through your career, you'll have similar situations and similar pitches and scenarios within games, and then that'll better prepare yourself. So when those occasions do arise, I have a trigger in my mind. We spoke about it briefly before. It's like a reset button. So if there are challenges or things are tough, being consistent within how you play, I think is a massive reset and trigger for myself to overcome those sorts of challenges. And again, being mentally brave and strong during those moments, and being able to stand up and still do your role, especially when times are tough, is a key piece of advice, not only for any individual, but then that also collectively works as a team. So you might see other players which are finding it hard during games or making a few mistakes, and I've been that player that has made 3 or 4 mistakes in a row, and then I've had other players around me to help support me and guide me and kind of give me strength. So it's important that you give support and help and guidance to your teammates, but then also you would then get that back from the players around you, and obviously also your coach.
Good. Yeah, good. Nice, consistent messages. Good.
Hi, I'm Ollie from the under 12 SAP team. I was wondering, if you go back in time and you give yourself advice at my age, what would it be?
Yeah, very good. If I was 12 again, what advice would I give myself as a 12-year-old? It would be similar to what my advice would be now, is to enjoy your football, to really keep pushing and challenging yourself to always be better. Be open to learning new things with the coaches. You're going through an age now, under 12s, 13s, 14s, where you're transitioning into different types of football from SAP into NPL. So it's going to be a little bit different, and you will be faced with some challenges. But always be open to learning. Always push yourself and work hard in any given moment of opportunity to play football. Most importantly, have fun and enjoy it. I think that you've still got to enjoy your football. So go in with the mindset that you're gonna get a lot out of the training session or the game, but then you're also gonna walk off the pitch with a smile on your face.
Nice.
My name is Bobby, and this is my question for the Redlands. Do you find it hard to have a strict diet?
Good question. Did I find it hard to have a strict diet? No. Like, I was very committed, and I had lots of hunger and desire to always be the best that I can be. So I have a good diet. I do have a few luxury items in there, but it's all in moderation. So I like ice cream and chocolate like the next person, but I was always disciplined in the amount of, I guess you could say, treats that I used to intake, or I still intake. I made sure that I always ate good, healthy, nutritious food. So obviously, takeaway food or fast food, or especially with hydration, with Coca-Cola or Powerades, I always made sure that I was hydrated with water. I always made sure that I had a good, nutritious diet that I knew what was going into my body would be a benefit, so that when I could perform, I was able to perform at my best.
Brilliant, mate. Links well with our little nutrition program's gone out. So yeah, good.
Bye.
Oh, bye.
How do you get pumped up and motivated before a game?
How do I get pumped up and motivated before the game? I guess for me, the game starts the moment the last game finishes. So as soon as, say for example, I play on a Saturday night and my game is until the next Saturday, my motivation starts as soon as I walk off the pitch from the first game. So I'm already thinking about how I can best prepare myself for next week's game. And obviously the initial 24, 48 hours is all about rest and recovery. It's all about good hydration and nutrition. And by having those sorts of protocols in mind gives my mindset the best opportunity to already motivate myself. So I'm already thinking about the next game. The subsequent training week, for me, it's like a constant build-up. So within the football that I play now, and especially the professional environment, it was always, the week was structured around the weekend's game. So tactically and technically, the coaching staff would always build up towards the game. Probably 24 hours before training, before the game, sorry, I ensured that I had a set routine, generally speaking, with the types of food, or the type of food that I ate the night before. So we were taught that the most important meal is the dinner before the dinner the night before the game, and that was always something which our nutritionists at the time ensured that we always had, good levels of nutrition. And then game day was pretty much waking up, and you already had that excitement as a player. You always get excited. It's game day. So self-motivation and self-drive was always something which was always instilled. And even today, I get excited. I get a little bit nervous. I always get a little bit nervous, and I think that also keeps me honest. When I get to a game, initially I like to, I guess you could say, be quite social with the team. Have a general conversation or a bit of banter with the players, which is quite relaxed. Generally speaking, we arrive an hour and a half, 2 hours before kickoff. So as things are starting to drive up, I personally like to listen to my own music. I have, I guess you could say, a playlist that kind of focuses my mind, and then yeah, pretty much from the warm up, it's all about the team. So motivation starts with myself, and I guess how I can include and involve the team and watch the team, and they motivate me to ensure that I'm ready for kickoff.
What's your meal the night before? What's your go-to?
My go-to meal before is I always have I either had steak with pasta and broccoli and carrots and potatoes, or it's chicken with pasta. Quite simple, but it's always I don't know, habits is probably the best way to put it.
Yeah, but good lean meat, carbohydrates, good, just like the kids have been taught. Good, mate. There's always a bit of chocolate pudding in there as well, though. You got to have some treats. You burn it off, so you're all right. In moderation. Good, mate. All right, next one.
Hey, Matt, did you ever experience a serious injury, and how did you stay mentally and physically motivated to recover?
Some great questions here. I've had one serious injury in my career. I've been very lucky with injuries. I tore a muscle in my hip joint, which which meant that I needed surgery when it was the third year when I was at Brisbane Roar, and it was at a time when the third year we finished fifth that year, so it was obviously a challenging year for the club, and I had my serious injury, which I missed 5 months of football, which was obviously a massive challenge and a massive setback in my career, and it was an experience which I kind of learned from, and I was so keen and eager to kind of get back to playing and get back to fitness that I think even the physios and the conditioning coaches got annoyed with me. Kept asking them to come and help me, come and put me through some sessions, whether or not it would be in the swimming pool or not, it would be we have special machines that can help injured players, that can support players running whilst they're during injuries. The science is phenomenal, but I had that hunger to get back as quickly as I could, but that I also kept motivated by working closely with the physio, working closely with the sports scientists and the conditioning coaches to ensure that I was the best that I could be and the fittest that I could be, even though I couldn't run and physically be on the pitch. So that's how I stayed challenged. That's how I stayed motivated and focused, was the drive and internal desire to get back as quickly as I can and to be as strong as I can. And also at the right time. I had lots of conversations and discussions with the physios and the coaches to make sure that I was on track and to make sure that there was I was ready, and that I followed their program, and by following their program meant that I didn't re-injure myself. So it's really important that when players are injured, that they do follow the advice from the coaches, the physios, the doctors, because by coming back too early or trying to push yourself when you're not quite ready, you're at risk of higher injury again. So I guess that's my experience of a major injury throughout my career. Good question.
Good, mate. I've just been taking notes how to do it, mate. Cheers.
Stay off the crutches. What?
That's right.
Hi Matt, how do you and your team prepare and motivate yourselves before the game?
Maybe just if you want to answer that, maybe from the team. What do you do as a team?
Yeah, as a team to motivate ourselves for the game, I'll talk about. Obviously, I've been involved in lots of teams and there's been lots of different ways that we kind of are motivated when it comes to the games. I'll use an example at Brisbane, because obviously it's a key moment and quite a successful moment. The motivation always came when it got to the point of the game. The motivation was already derived from the training and the environment and culture that we created during the weeks, months, and year. So when it comes to the game, we were so motivated to perform because of the environment and the culture that was built from the players and the coaching staff and the club, that the motivation was already exceedingly high. That when it came to the game, it was like a build of excitement and just ready to erupt as such. Is probably one way to kind of explain it. So we used to use training and any other engagement with the players during the week to build up our motivation level. So when it came to the game, we couldn't wait for kickoff.
No, good, nice, yeah, good.
Hi Matt, how do you prepare before each game, and who was your idol growing up?
Maybe so you've obviously talked about how you prepare, so maybe if you just jump in and do the idol.
Yep, very good question. My idol growing up was Paul Scholes, actually. So I grew up, I guess, in the era of the young players coming through Manchester United, like Giggs and Scholes and Beckham and Nevilles, and I guess lots of players had different personalities and different qualities on the pitch. Some got more attention than others during those years, but I guess Paul Scholes was a player that, in my opinion, during those points, kind of went under the radar, because I think that in modern football now, and then also the era that he went through, Paul Scholes was, in my opinion, probably one of the best midfielders of his generation. his midfield capabilities to be able to link play, his vision and ability to be able to create and bring in other players around him to manipulate players when he had the ball and disorganize opponents was something which I guess when you refer it to a modern day player, you have your Iniestas and Xavis at Barcelona. So his weakness was probably tackling. So I never used to probably watch too much about that. But Paul Scholes was a player that I always used to watch very, very closely. When I was growing up, I used to idolize him within, and he also had a very, very different or very good range of decision making. So he knew when to play short, he knew when to play long, he knew when to move into position to let other players receive the ball. Like, he was very smart. He made good decisions more often than not, and he was always consistent. His performances were never a 10 out of 10 one week and a 2 out of 10 the next week. They were always consistently high. There was always a 7 or an 8 out of 10 every single week. And I think that reliability and consistency when you get to that top level is really important.
Very important. Not going for Alan Knight in goal for Pompey?
Or Sammy Igo.
Yeah.
I was going to go with Keane, but I thought, but there we go.
Keane, controversial, mate. Right, next one.
Pre-match meal.
Yeah, so pre-match meal. Maybe if you can link this for me. So the kids have been given an example by myself of a meal the night before, and then a pre-match snack like day of the game. Like if you're kicking off at lunchtime, like maybe what you would eat. If you kick off at 3 o'clock on a Saturday, maybe what you would eat Saturday morning.
Yeah. Okay. Yep. So very good question. Pre-match food is massively important. I think the meal, like I said before, the meal the night before the game, I would always ensure that I had a piece of steak or a piece of chicken with some pasta and some vegetables. Quite plain, I guess you could say. I was never one to mix lots of spices and sauces, especially so close to the game. The pre-match meal is very, very important. So regardless of your kickoff time, so I'll just use an example. If you're kicking off at 3 o'clock, then I would generally eat 4 hours before the kickoff time. So I would always ensure then that I'd have not a big portion, but a significant portion of pasta, and it would just be some plain pasta. So I guess my go-to there would be just some plain pesto pasta, and that would be 4 hours before the kickoff. And then when I arrived to the club, so 2 hours before, I would always have, say, some nuts. I'd always have some piece of fruit, most commonly a banana. So when I'm in and around the changing room and I'm feeling a bit peckish, that would always be in my bag. And I'd also have a banana at half time. So lots of people are using sweets and lollies at half time, and that's completely fine if that's your routine. But I would always make sure I had a banana at half time as well, just to reintake in from a nutritional perspective. Post game, I'd always make sure that I would try and eat. It's difficult in the semi-professional arena, but in the professional arena, we'd always have some sort of food, 45 minutes to an hour after kickoff. We would have initial snacks straight away, but then we would have some subsequent food. So nutrition, 24 hours or 12, 14, 18 hours leading in, and then straight after the game is really important.
If you could change anything in your career, what would you change?
If I could take what?
If you could change anything in your career, what would you change?
If I could change anything in my career. Okay, yeah, good question. If I could change anything on my career when I reflect back on it now, it would probably be to be a lot more braver than what I was throughout my mid to late teenage years. So if you could say from the age of 15 through to about 17, 18, I guess, within the environment and the time of my football career, I was playing to not make mistakes rather than being brave and playing to still do the things that got me in that position in the first place. So if I was to look back, I would try to be more brave and deal with the pressures and challenges a lot better
probably what I did during at the moment in time. So I guess you could say, to simplify it, if I haven't done already, it's to always be brave within your football. Always have the confidence to express yourself in the manner in which you know you have the capabilities to be able to perform.
No, good one, mate. Good. Sport psychology, good.
At what age did you become a stand-up player, and how old were you when you realised football could be your career?
Sorry, what was the first bit on that?
Yeah, so at what age were you a standout player, and then what age did you think football could be a career for you?
Standout player. Define standout player just quickly.
I guess maybe like, obviously to be fair, you might have answered it with once you get sort of recognised and taken into the academy at Pompey. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Very, very, very good question. I think that there's different phases in your career and different levels in your career in which you're all going to play to. That's certainly been the case within my own experiences within football. There's been some teams where it's been semi-professional, and obviously there's been some occasions, and fortunately that there's been some professional experiences in there. I guess with regards to being a standout player, I think that's generally speaking, it's when you start. I'll go back a bit. When you start playing in the limelight or in the professional arena, obviously the pressures change. So, you go from playing in front of, especially in my career, hundreds of people watching a game and without it being televised, to then playing in front of thousands, and fortunately at times in front of millions, and then you're on TV and you're being, I guess you could say, criticised and scrutinised for every little action, or analysed from every little action. So how it's kind of been standout for me, it's kind of, I've always tried to control that, and I've always tried to adjust to those different environments and learn from other people throughout that environment. So being a standout is always, you have your qualities on the pitch and you have your responsibilities on the pitch, and therefore dealing with that and being focused and not being complacent that you are potentially playing at a high level, or you are one of the better players in the team. It's being humble, that you keep working hard, that you keep learning, that you keep trying to be better, and have the mindset that not to focus on things that you can't necessarily control, and just continue to focus on the things that you can control, because there's many things that they're gonna influence your career at times when you can't even impact on it. So I've always tried to look at myself first. I've always tried to analyze myself first. I've always tried to concentrate on myself first and control the things that I can control. So I think that's how I dealt with being a standout player.
That's magic, mate. Magic.
Just a second, Greg.
Yeah.
Can you be quiet there, please?
Oh, you're all right, mate. Don't worry. My little fella's coming over in a minute, so it's going to be chaos. So don't worry, mate.
I wanted to ask what your diet is like and your training schedule.
Kind of touched on that, to be fair, haven't we, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll just, no offence, but we'll skip over that one.
Yeah.
So, all right, this one is, you can probably read it, but hi, Matt. I wanted to know what it felt like to step on the pitch for your first professional game. Did you feel pressured, or were you just happy to be able to play at that high level of football?
Yeah, very, very good question. There's been some great topical questions today, by the way. I remember having the first opportunity to play professional football. I was 27 at the time, and there's a piece of advice that Sam Safe told me. Actually, he phoned me before I arrived at the ground, and he said, obviously, you're going to be excited. There's going to be lots of adrenaline and lots of nerves going through your mind. And he said to me, just whatever you do, the first time you get the ball, just give it easy. He said, just as soon as you get it, just give the ball easy, and just don't try and overcomplicate things, and then feel yourself into the game. So that was I guess you could say, a good piece of advice that I had when I first, to try and calm myself down. So it ended up there's footage. I don't know if it was the first passage of play, but there was a passage of play where I got turned by the striker, and I had to basically do a recovery run, and I was able to get back in and impact so that we didn't concede anything from it. But as I was walking out to the pitch, I guess my first feelings were just don't make a mistake. Just don't make a mistake. You've waited so long for an opportunity to become a professional player, and you want it so bad, and then you feel very honoured and privileged and proud to be able to achieve that. But you're in the mindset in the professional of performance. Like you must be able to perform. So yeah, at that initial walking out to the pitch, it was, wow, this is unbelievable. This is amazing. What a feeling. And then on the other side of my brain, it was, okay, well, play well, don't make a mistake. And then pretty much after the first few minutes, you don't really think, or you don't really feel the stadium and the fans and the TV. All that you see is yourself, your teammates, your opposition, and then you're just playing football. So that's how I kind of blocked out the external noise, is kind of what I call it, and that I focused just predominantly on playing the game.
And what got you there in the first place? Playing well.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Good. All right, next one.
Hey Matt, Trent here. My question to you is, what main sacrifices did you have to make to become a professional footballer? What was your motivation and thought process whenever you trained?
Maybe just answer the last bit, mate. Like, what was your focus when you were training? Like, you've kind of touched on it about yourself.
Yeah. So again, really good question. Focusing on, I guess, what sacrifices. It was sacrifices for training, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Obviously, within the professional environment, and also with any kind of football, you're always building up to the weekend. Now, in my opinion, the best way you can prepare yourself for the weekend is to prepare yourself in training. So I was always of the belief that, and especially with my time at Brisbane, for example, we used to train harder sometimes in training than what we would do in a game. Like the game, you just don't know the intensity, you don't know the dynamic, you don't know. You can control a lot of it within your own method of play, but there's some games where they're easier or harder than others. Whereas within training, we always used to ensure that it was of really high intensity every single session, every single part of the session. So I knew that if I was to perform the best that I can be at training and train harder than sometimes what the games are, I needed to make sure my preparation leading into training was great. So as soon as training finished, for example, it was in ice baths, it was in recovery mode, it was, we used to weigh ourselves in and out to ensure, to see how much fluid we've lost. So I knew what fluid I needed to take to rehydrate for the next day. When I got home, I made sure that I actually ate quite little and often. So I'd have kind of in-between meals. So I guess you could say I made sure that I was disciplined and made sacrifices, that I wasn't doing other things. Like my routine after training was quite consistent. And if that meant that there was something socially that I made the decision that obviously I had to prepare the best I could be for the next training day. I made sure that I had a good night's sleep. I made sure that, like I said, I ate that main meal of the day. I made sure was of high quality intake. Yeah. Sleep was really important. Hydration was really important. I used to weigh myself in the mornings. So as soon as I wake up, I weigh myself in the morning. So if I was still down, then I'd make sure that I would take a electrolyte as such. I'd put a little electrolyte in some water, just in order to prepare. So the sacrifices are always, football's always non-stop. It's always about what can I do to get back to an optimal level to train. And then that repeat next 24 hours, next 24 hours, next 24 hours, and that obviously leads through the training week and into the game.
Like how it dominates your whole life, isn't it?
It is. Like I said, it's it comes down to choices. I guess you can, and I've got a young family, and it's a bit about a balance, but it's particularly in that pro environment, you have to be very disciplined and very, very strict and focused. Like I said, it's balance and moderation, but also balance and moderation at the right time. So again, takeaways or fast food or cans of Coke or coffees and teas and hot chocolates or any of the things which I knew were going into my body or late nights socializing with friends. It was not doing that for the benefit of my performance the next day and the following day and the following day, because you accumulate fatigue as the days and the weeks acquire. So you might not even think that a little minor episode will have any impact on something 2 or 3 weeks down the line. Whereas if you get into them small little habits, slowly over a longer cycle, you'll start seeing changes in your performance.
Yeah, definitely, 100%. Matt, good stuff, mate. Right, a couple more. Under 16s.
Hi Matt, I'm Daniel, and I just wanted to know, how did you get a trial for Brisbane Roar?
How did I get a trial for Brisbane Roar? So when I first moved to Southeast Queensland, I was actually playing for Palm Beach at the time, and I touched on it a little bit earlier. I got recognised not because of one-off performances, but my longer sustained performance over the course of a season. So I played a season. At that point, there was no NPL. It was just your old Brisbane Premier League is the top league here in Southeast Queensland, and we had a good season as a team. But my performances over that season were really high on a consistent basis. And when you're performing well on a consistent basis, and within the professional environment, there's always scouts which are going to be watching. So I guess they recognised my performances within my team, and then they tracked and monitored my performances over a longer period of time. I then went back to England actually to finish off my education, and then I came back and it was the same. I was playing at Brisbane Strikers, and my performances over a longer and sustained period of time rose awareness for professional clubs. And my story is a little bit different because obviously I'm English, and then I gained my citizenship for Australia. So Brisbane Roar invited me in for trials, and Gold Coast United at the time invited me in for trials, and also North Queensland Fury prior to me signing. But there wasn't an opportunity for me to sign because through a number of reasons. One, I wasn't selected, quite simply. But there was other occasions where I was classed as a visa player, so therefore I couldn't take up one of the positions. But those trials came about because of my performances within my club.
I think the big thing there is consistency, isn't it? Like, I can speak from experience, like in the old state league when you were at Strikers, when you played certain teams, there was always like the 1 or 2 players where you were like, they've got so-and-so, and you definitely had that reputation that sort of when you were coming up to play, everyone was like, oh, Matty Smith, Brisbane Strikers, like, he's a player you need to be careful of, like, and do extra homework on. And that sort of, I think that sort of spreads within the football community, doesn't it? Like, the coaches talk to each other, the players talk to each other, and your reputation and based off your consistent performance starts to then grow, doesn't it?
Yeah, and that is a good point. I think that consistency over that longer period of time, and I never. And it's interesting to hear you talk about that from an outsider's perspective. But as a player, I never, I guess, focused, generally speaking, on what anybody else was thinking, apart from myself and also my teammates and my coach. Yeah. So whether or not that might have been the case, that I had that impact from as an opponent with other clubs, I didn't focus on that. I guess what I'm trying to say is some players might focus on that and could potentially get a little bit complacent with that, whereas that never that thought never even crossed my mind. Yeah. Like my consistent thought was, okay, well, how am I going to impact this game? How am I going to be the best player that I can be today? How is our team going to be successful? How are we going to play well? How are we going to win? That was always my train of thought of focus. And you're right. Doing that week in, week out, that's I guess you could say, the reputation that other people make of you without you even doing anything different than just playing football.
That's right. But that's probably the best way to be. That you're not adding external pressure onto yourself, because you're just being yourself. It's the other people that start talking about you, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that it helps with the environment that the club and the coaches put you in as well with that. Like the mindset and culture within within Brisbane Strikers, because again, like it's a elite club, and it's one which I also learned, different things from different stages in my career. Yeah. But the coach at the time, Stuart McLaren, he just retired actually at Brisbane Roar, and so he was a new coach at that moment in time, and his environment and culture that he created was for that moment in time was probably very, very high, because he'd just come out of the pro environment, so he had a new era of behaviours and standards and disciplines. So I guess by me going into that, that kind of fueled my ambition even more. So I was very careful, I guess, even when I had a bit of decision as to which club to join as such. There's some occasions where I didn't necessarily, not that I didn't have a choice, because I always had a choice, but there wasn't too many options. But for example, when I left Brisbane Roar and I went to Bangkok Glass in Thailand, I made sure that the environment and the culture of the club was really aligned with my character and personality, and that I could play a role there, so that I'm thinking more longer term and not necessarily a short term role. Yeah. Does that kind of make sense? So as a player, as you develop your career, I'm not saying within your junior rank, but when you get senior football, I think it's really important you align yourself with a club, with a culture, with a coach, with a team that's aligned with your personality, and I guess where you want to go. So when I came back from England, I made sure that I tried to be in the best club available, for the highest club that I could get to within that moment in time. And at that point, it was Brisbane Strikers. So I knocked on the door and said, can I come and try? Because I knew that was the best position or place for me at that moment in time to put me in the shop window.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Good advice. Right, brother's got something to say.
I'm to know how much extra training you did when you were younger.
Yeah, just some extra training.
How much extra training did I do when I was younger? I was playing football every single day. So away from coaching with the team, or the coaching sessions with the team and the games, it was generally speaking before school. So I always remember getting to school early and going on the playground, and whether or not it'd be a tennis ball, whether or not it'd be an old scruffy mitre football, it didn't really matter as long as it was round. Playing before school, so when school started, my shoes were scruffy, my shirt was sweaty. No, not sweaty, it was wet from the rain in England more so than anything else. But I was playing just socially before school. I was playing at half time and break. I was playing directly after school. I was then pretty much going straight into training with my team. And then on the nights where there was no training, it was the message from my parents would just be home before it gets dark. And in the winter, it was 4:30. In the summer, it was 10 o'clock. So depending upon the month. But I guess my football started at home. It started in the garden. It started in playgrounds. It started at school. Then football, when I was growing up, then spread into clubs and teams and coaches and selections and elite football. So yeah, I guess the more you can do away from the club, and just play socially, play different variations of game, 1v1, 2v2, World Cups, whatever it may be, then that's playing against older kids. I learned a lot when I was growing up playing against kids 2 or 3 years older than me. It taught me pretty quickly how to look after myself, how to get in certain positions, and I guess you could say, that's probably one element that we haven't probably touched on is players playing against different age groups. But yeah, that's certainly in terms of being streetwise, I learned a lot in the greens in the garden.
100%. No, good advice, mate. Good advice. All right.
Hey Matt, my name's Dan Quinn. I play for the 16s of Redlands, and I would love to thank you for the opportunity to ask you questions about your professional football career. My question for you is, what is the most memorable game of all of your footballing career?
Well, top question. There's things which, and I really hope as players you get to experience also. I've only ever felt this feeling twice in my life from a adrenaline perspective. And for those of you you're all probably too young to be able to do this, but maybe you'll do it one day. Is I jumped out of an airplane, right, when I was like, I don't know, probably 19 or 20, and the adrenaline rush that I got from jumping out of the plane was just something I've never experienced before in my life. And the only other time I've ever felt that from an adrenaline perspective was when Eric Partaloo scored the equalising goal in the first grand final against Central Coast Mariners. I can't describe to you the adrenaline that kind of went, and we hadn't even won the game. We just scored an equalising goal, but the highest adrenaline experience that I've, in terms of a high point, is most definitely that. I guess not second to that, because it's not second to that. It's probably equal to that. Is obviously, once we won it the first year, the grand final, is even harder to win it the second year. And obviously that year Brisbane Roar was the hunted as such. Everyone wanted to knock us off, and we had this great run of like 36. So it posed different challenges, and obviously being the captain of that team was obviously very, very special. So to be able to win the grand final the second year was great achievement and great feeling. And then obviously the third year at Brisbane, we weren't as successful, and then to come back and win it the fourth year was also another massive elation. So in terms of those top experiences, you work so hard for so long over a longer period of time. And for us, it was over for me personally, it was over a 5-year period in my life. But individual years and seasons, there's so much that goes on in the background to get to that point. That the end product is absolutely massive. Obviously, representing the Socceroos is a feeling which I really hope you all can get the opportunity to do at some point in your career, because that's to play international football and have that representation is a massive privilege and a feeling which will always stay with us. So a few experiences in there.
Mate, you've had a lot. That's like I said at the start of the video, mate. Like, we're so lucky that you've given up so much time, more than we'd planned, mate. But just listening to you talk about those experiences of grand finals and like playing for your country, etc. Like that's it's something I reckon that every kid probably aspires to, and you've been like really fortunate enough to achieve it, haven't you? But when we listen to you talk, there's a clear process to how you've got there, and the sacrifices, the discipline to do that. It's just unreal. Like, these kids are so lucky to hear it from you.
No, to be honest, there's people have played a massive role in my career. And when I was younger, there was in different formats, because there was no internet back then. But there was different occasions where you get to engage yourself with other professionals and such. And even looking at your career and your position at Redlands, Graham, like the kids are truly lucky and grateful that you're there overseeing their program. The experiences and knowledge and qualifications that you've got with regards to helping Redlands and their players is I know that I'm at a rival club now, but that's a massive benefit to football in general, particularly in this state. Like, Redlands can learn a lot from you, and even talking and listening to some of the things that you're already doing at Redlands is a massive step into giving these players the best opportunity for them to be able to make it.
No, mate, checks in the post for saying that. Cheers, mate. But no, I appreciate it. It's good. I think obviously this coronavirus has just given everybody time just to sort of reflect a little bit and just sit down and have chats about footballs, like keeping us sane. But it's good, isn't it? Like, it's just set some processes in place. I'll just see. I think there's another.
Matt, yeah. I'm Josh. I play for the under-16s at Redlands. My question is, what would you do to keep yourself motivated as you can't see your teammates due to the coronavirus if you were still playing today? Thanks. Hi, Matt.
Right. Yeah, obviously we're in very unique circumstances at the moment, and I spoke about it briefly that throughout my career, and like there's been different challenges and setbacks, and we're all going through one now. I think that the best way that teammates, clubs and coaches can kind of get through this virus is to engage and stay connected, to communicate at any or as much as possible. So whether or not it's via Zoom, messaging or Zoom chats, whether or not it's with your own internal message groups, whether or not it's playing online FIFA, whether or not it's picking up the phone and saying hello. I think it's just really important right now that we do what we can as individuals. So make sure that when we return to football, you're in as best possible shape for yourself and your team, so that when football does resume, you're ready to go. But then from a team perspective, I think engagement and communication is massively important, because we're all going through different challenges. So like I said, just picking up the phone sometimes, or having a Zoom chat just to check in, I think is a really good starting point.
Oh, I think that's massive. Like in the world that we kind of were living in before coronavirus, we kind of become so isolated with technology sort of making your earphones in, and you've got your PlayStation, your phones, like it kind of makes you so isolated. Now that some of that's sort of stopped and taken away from us a little bit, it's like, oh, it is that simple where you could pick up a phone and just have a chat with someone and keep in touch with your teammate, like find out what's going on. Like I've been doing that as a joke with anyone in my phone that's over 60. I've been calling saying I'm just checking in with the OAPs, but it's that simple, isn't it? Just to have a chat.
Yeah, and I think that I'm also conscious of, it's a good thing that we have communication this way, but I'm also conscious of players just being by the computer as well.
Yeah.
You know, because every form of communication right now is via computer. So it can even be small little ideas, like you can get a mate, or you can get a group. You can all log into a YouTube channel and watch like a 20-minute skills program, which you can do in your front room, and you can, if you want, you can put your speaker on and you can talk to each other through it and just have a bit of banter with it. Like, I think that it's important that there's different tones and different messages that I guess, and different ways to communicate within this moment in time. But like I said, being active is one way which you can really help and kind of focus your mindset when football does resume, you're kind of ready to go. And then the other way is, like I said, either messaging or Zoom or picking up the phone. And even if you're going for the ones that are a bit older, if you're going for a walk or a jog, or taking the dog for a walk, just take your AirPods in, take your phone, and just call a mate.
That's right, have a chat. Right, this is definitely the last question, mate.
Hi, from the 16s. My question for you is, who was the best footballer that you have played against? Thank you.
You kind of answered that. So you're going against Tevez?
I guess you could say the best. That question is a little bit different. I guess the direct opponent was Tevez and Llorente. If I was to go best opponent I've played against, would probably be Pirlo.
Okay. Yeah. That's fairly self-explanatory, isn't it, mate? Like, absolutely.
The way that he just control. But if I was to say to the younger kids, it'll probably be Pogba, because they probably might not know who Pirlo is. But yeah, I think that I've been very lucky,
mate. Well, like on that note, mate, we've been very lucky. Like I've said to you, just for you to donate well over 2 hours of your time when we planned for 1 hour is really nice, mate. And just some themes that you've sort of reinforced for the kids there are great. And from my perspective, mate, like, you're so humble. Like, you probably don't really realise it, but you've won so much in the game. Like, you're probably one of the most decorated players in the A-League history. Like, so for us just to be able to pinch that amount of time, especially with the baby factory you've going on in the background, mate, like, we're so grateful, mate. Yeah, mate. I'm more, and you've got the five-a-side team. So, but no, look, really appreciate you giving us that time, mate, and the insights. I really hope that the kids just, even if there's one thing from that interview there that they take, it's been worthwhile. So really appreciate it, mate.
Look, it's my privilege. Really, thank you, Graham and Redlands, for reaching out, and happy to speak anytime, mate. So it's never an issue for us. I'm always available. So anytime you want to reach out or communicate anyway, please make sure you do.